You know, we quite often look at archives and think, do we really need to maintain data forever, which has kind of become a new retention period for us these days. And if you think over the course of 100 years or more, how valuable could that information be? My absolute favorite documentary right now is one called They Shall Not Grow Old, directed by Peter Jackson. This was created with original footage from World War I. They took the footage, they re-imaged it, they were able to add colors, slow down frame rates, make it look very natural. They could even lip read the individuals who were in the footage and recreate an audio track with voice. So all of this gave us this incredible insight to culture, history, politics from 100 years ago. Not to mention, it created a lot of money. There was also a revenue stream from data that had been sitting there for over 100 years, but not just sitting there, it had been being managed by the Imperial War Museum, who co-sponsored the production of this particular documentary. So we are fortunate to have with us today from the Imperial War Museum to tell us more about their mission, their goals, and how they pull those off and achieve them. Mr. Ian Crawford, who is the Chief Information Officer at IWM, and Rob Tyler, who is the IT Infrastructure Manager. So with that, Ian, I'm going to turn it over to you. I believe you speak first, and you've got the floor.
Hi there. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we do. Now, we don't see your image, but we see your screen.
No, I'll put my image on later on. I'll just go through the slides first of all. So I'm being joined by a colleague, Rob Tyler. So I'll kick off. My name's Ian Crawford. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Imperial War Museum. And I'm going to be discussing the challenges at the IWM, the storage challenges at the IWM. So a quick introduction. The IWM is unique in its coverage of conflicts from First World War to the present day. We're a family of 5 museums in the UK. I'm based at the museum at Lambeth Road, IWM London. We've been there since about 1936. We've got a branch, IWM North in Manchester. We've got IWM Duxford near Cambridge, which is physically our largest branch. It's got over 108 buildings. It's still an active airfield. It was built in 1917, so during the First World War, and it served during the Second World War as well. Both the RAF and US Air Force were based there. We've got Churchill's War Rooms under the Treasury in Whitehall in London, and we've got HMS Belfast, which is moored on the River Thames. It's a World War II cruiser. It's got quite a famous history. It fought in the Korean War as well. So we look after all those 5 branches. So history, for those of you who don't know much about our work, the IWM was founded by an Act of Parliament in 1920 to collect and preserve objects that will capture the human experience of the First World War. At the formal opening of the museum, King George V talked about creating a memorial which speaks to the heart and to the imagination, made of items which had an individual history which could be recorded and cherished, and we've been doing this ever since. So 100 years on, our collections are displayed and stored across the 5 branches, but our holdings and our work is increasingly digital. So nearly 15 years ago, we needed to invest in a digital asset management system at DAMS, which we could build on for the next 100 years, and which could support the national and international work we do. So the IT environment we're looking after. So we've got around about 800 users. Most of them are full-time staff, but we also use volunteers for some of our cataloguing and digitisation. We've got about 150 servers in our infrastructure. They're primarily Microsoft based. We're a Microsoft shop on our server and desktops. We mainly use HP workstations and servers. The 5 sites are connected by high-speed wide area network links. We're on a system in the UK called JANET, the Joint Academic Network, which is a sort of university-based network, and we've got connections, about 1 gig connections connecting the sites. And then we've got business as usual storage systems for email, for user files, departmental data, etc. But additionally, we're supporting this dedicated storage system, the DAMS, for our digital archive. So our digital asset challenge, our films, our videotape, our audio recordings and photographs on their original media won't last forever. So we've got, for example, we've filmed nitrate film, which is a not particularly good medium to operate with. So we are busy scanning these before they degrade, especially the celluloid film and the nitrate, or become unplayable, mainly our VHS and pneumatic tape, where we've seen problems everybody's seeing with aged tape disintegrating, etc. So currently we store around 750,000 assets, which is around 1.5 petabytes, and this is broken down into the following. These are the non-compressed files we use for archive masters. We've got about 5,000 film and video scan masters, about 1.2 petabytes, and we use a file format called DPX and also a bit of MOV as well. We've got about 100,000 audio masters. We've got a really deep audio collection going back to the 1930s, and we've got about 10 terabytes of that digitized at the moment, and we use the WAV format. We've got just nearly 500,000 image masters. That's out of a collection of about 11 million. That's taken up about 20 terabytes. We use the TIFF format. And then we've got thousands of access versions, the versions that are on our website or we use commercially. And we've got about 185 terabytes of renditions. That would be ProRes, MPEG, Flash, JPEG. And as I said, we need to keep this data forever. But this total is increasing daily, so we're still getting material given to us. For example, people find old film in attics and various storage boxes and send it into the museum, and we're also getting material from the armed services still. So we're still scanning our existing film collection. That generates about 10 terabytes per month. We've got a videotape scanning project which is ongoing. And that will generate about 900 terabytes over 4 years. And as I say, we still receive collections in analog formats, but increasingly this is changing to born digital media. So, for example, we are still an archive for the armed forces in the UK. We get declassified film, training film, operational film, and that goes into our collection. So we're now on our second version of the dams. Since I've been at the museum, I've been at the museum for about 14 years, and one of my first jobs was to look into putting in a new digital asset management system. And we went through various iterations, but we're now on our second dam system effectively. So our current system was developed with a company called Axial, and they're the supplier of our collections management system. We've been working with them for a while now, and they've been integrating dams features into the collections management system. We use a product of theirs called AdLib, and this allows a true offline ingest of much larger batches of data compared with our previous dams. It is continuously being developed with additional features such as sending data to S3 targets, so obviously things like the SpectraLIVE Black Pearl. And at this point I'll hand you over to Rob Tyler. Rob works with me as the infrastructure manager for our dam system. And Rob can talk about the way the system's configured.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Can everyone see the infrastructure overview slide?
Yes, coming through nicely.
Great. Okay. Well, my name's Rob Tyler, and as Ian said, I manage the IT infrastructure underpinning the dams systems here at the museum. I'm just going to run through an overview of what we do with the two main tranches of data that we deal with. First, and the bulk of our data is the master film scans. So all the celluloid film that Ian mentioned before, that's all processed in Duxford. We scan a lot of it ourselves, and currently about 1.2 petabytes and growing. And then it's what I class as everything else. So master image, master sound, and all the other renditions of the master film scans. The everything else category is a lot smaller than the master film scans, and they're all treated differently. So that's around 250 terabytes and growing. So the data itself, well, for the master film scans, it's stored on tape primarily because it's rarely accessed. We need to keep it forever, but primarily the people who need it are, like Bob mentioned earlier, the documentary by Peter Jackson. We provide a lot of master film scans for that project. So that's rarely accessed, stored on tape using the SpectraLIVE Black Pearl object storage gateway, and end users are able to search this tape library to retrieve this data using the Eon browser software. Everything else is stored on disk, so they're just shared on standard shared folders on our SpectraLIVE NAS platform. You can see a picture of it there. That's a head unit above with an expansion tray underneath. As you can see, a very dense capability of drives then, so plenty of opportunity for us to expand into it. And then I'll just talk now about how the data is backed up. So everything is backed up as well to tape. So we have two SpectraLogic T950 tape libraries, so we're very fortunate in that regard. But we've got a different tape technology in each one. So right now we've got LTO7 in one library and IBM TS1150 in another. We deliberately chose two different tape technologies in case there was a problem with one of them that came out later on. So we've got a bit of diversity there in our technology, which is good. Both of these libraries are at the Duxford site in Cambridgeshire, but fortunately, because the site is so big, we've got two server rooms which are half a mile apart, and yet still on the 10 gig fibre channel, Ethernet and 8 gig fibre channel networks. So that's really good. The primary backup uses the Black Pearl, which writes the data to our two libraries at the same time using the open LTFS tape format. We've got a secondary backup as well, a more traditional solution you might say, using backup exec, which also sends data to a partition on the LTF library as well. So this is just a diagram of what I've just said. So we have a film scanner here on the left who transfers his DPX film scan data to a NAS unit here. DPX is a preservation file format and it's quite unwieldy to deal with. Each frame of film is stored as a separate file. So 24 frames per second, for a minute, you get something like 1,440 files, and for 30 minutes worth of footage, you're over 43,000 separate files. So that's really difficult to deal with. So we zip those up into big chunks, and then we start moving it around the network. So the data is zipped up and automatically transferred into the Black Pearl object storage gateway, which then, depending on the rules we have set up for the bucket that we're sending the data into, it will basically write data to the LTO partition on this library and the TS1150 partition on this library. These two libraries are half a mile apart. And it does that seamlessly. We just send objects to the gateway, it does the rest, dead easy. The secondary backup that I mentioned briefly is here. This is a backup exec. That takes another copy of the film scan data and stores it on LTO tape here as well in a different partition. Everything else, which is the master image, the master sound, and some renditions or lower quality versions of the film, they get adjusted in London. Essentially, that's where the bulk of our DAM systems actually are. And a collection of Axial DAM's servers process this information, read the metadata, store it in a database, move the assets to an enterprise level NAS solution, which is here. This is the Spectra NAS solution. You might see a reference to Verdi here. That was the old name. It's now called Black Pearl NAS. So we've got two of those. We've got I think it's about 300 terabyte NAS in London and the same in Duxford over here. And this replicates overnight automatically. And then we've also got another backup job here with backup exec that sends that data to the T950. So we've got our data in three locations there, two different sites, different disk and tape technology. More recently, we've been looking at how we can leverage our investment in the SpectraLogic equipment that we've been using for DAMs and looking at the other non-DAMs data that we have to handle. So we've got some shared folders that are used by the audiovisual and the exhibitions departments. Just seem to be getting larger and larger. Seem to be quite heavy with media file types. It's all unstructured. And we have a general reluctance from users to organize this or ingest it into the DAMs. A lot of the time there isn't sufficient time or resource to actually spend on sorting it out. The lack of knowledge about the data, a lot of the data was created by people who don't work here anymore. But some of the data, of course, isn't suitable for ingest into the official museum archive, into the DAMs. So we've been looking at SpectraLogic store cycle, which is a type of hierarchical storage management system. What it allows you to do is to pick a source shared folder on the network somewhere, scan it, analyze the data, and then allow you to move that data to a different tier of storage. In our case, we've got a lot of this data on tier 1 disk, and we want to move it onto tape because we've got all these wonderful tape libraries. So in our examples, we're looking at moving files that are older than 2 years, more than a gigabyte in size, and are of the media file types. So, MOVs, MPEGs, AVIs, MP4s, all that sort of stuff. We think they're the easiest ones to move. They're the ones that give the biggest space savings if we do move them, and so that keep our tier 1 disk requirements under control. So Store Cycle moves these files onto tape. It actually sends them to Black Pearl, and Black Pearl does all the stuff to tape in the background. And then it replaces them with a stub HTML file. And the users will see this file. It's got the same name as the original media file, but with the .html on the end. They can open that and they can see a web page, and that provides a link back to the Store Cycle web application to enable them to restore the file if they need to. So yeah, this is how it sort of fits into our infrastructure. So a user here in London is accessing this particular server, which is a file server having lots of unstructured data. The Store Cycle application here will scan this file server, decide which files it can move off, send them to Black Pearl. When it's sure Black Pearl has got them, it will then replace them with a HTML stub file on the file server. The Black Pearl then in its own time will send that data to 2 different tape libraries using 2 different types of tape technology, and make sure it's all securely stored away. You probably have seen this Arctic Blue reference here as well. I think that's that is actually an extended disk cache for the Black Pearl object storage gateway. I don't think it's called Arctic Blue anymore. I think it's just an extended disk cache now. So we're obviously constantly migrating data to new hardware because we need to keep this data forever. So we're always looking at the next technologies coming down the road, enterprise NAS, standard NAS, and back onto tape. So we try and replace our NAS hardware every 5 years. Disks may be sooner than that. If the disk sizes have been increased substantially, then we can use it. And then the tape libraries are upgraded by replacing the drives and the tapes. The T950 libraries are great because we don't have to replace the whole library. We can just slide in a new tape drive and obviously replace the tapes, and off we go. We started out with LTO4 tapes, and at the moment we've still got some LTO5 left, but we're pretty much we're sort of at least 2/3 onto LTO7 now, so we tend to skip a generation, generally speaking. So I imagine we'll go to LTO9 in the future. Black Pearl has built-in migration capability between tape generations, and this is what we're going to kick off soon with ours. Our Black Pearl still has data on LTO5, the majority of it is on LTO7. If I make sure there's enough LTO7 tapes in the Black Pearl partition, I can just click one button and tell Black Pearl to migrate that data from LTO5 to LTO7, and it will just do that for me in the background. So that was a major factor in us choosing Black Pearl technology. Just one last slide, future data storage requirements. We always need to consider the progress of existing projects. We've got this videotape project which is 900 terabytes, which we're still working through now, but we have new projects all the time, of course, and more of it is becoming more digital footage from more recent conflicts. And more recently we've just bought a 4K scanner, so certain celluloid film, like our 35mm film reels, will benefit from being scanned at 4K as opposed to 2K, which is what our current scanner does. So we've got a 4K scanner on the way, and of course what that means is essentially we'll have 4 times as much data per film. So just to finish, we have around 1.5 petabytes of unique data, but of course with all the copies that we need to have to keep this data safe, we actually store 85 petabytes. And that's me. Thank you.
All right, beautiful overview, guys. We have one question coming in, and we might have a minute for another one if anyone wants to write in. The first question is, do you have any media lifecycle management? For example, do you check your files for data integrity frequently?
Well, there's a couple of things there. The T950 has its own media lifecycle management logging to check what it thinks the health of each tape is, so I do monitor that. Secondly, Black Pearl has a facility to verify all the data that it has under its control, so we've run that a couple of times. But really, one step prior to that is the actual DAMS system itself. The software will soon have the ability to randomly select a digital asset and check its checksum against what was stored at the time it was ingested. So we've got sort of 3 levels, but we think the DAMS level check is probably the best because it's purely randomized selecting of assets. But between all 3, we like to think we're reasonably well covered.
I think it comes across very clearly that you guys are serious about protecting this information. One question also came in, is there any conflict in working with 2 different types of tape technology?
None at all. It's been dead easy, honestly. We had one T950 to start with just LTO, and then we were fortunate to be able to get another one, and the default choice was get a different tape technology, don't get the same thing. We don't know, in 5 years' time there may be something nasty is found, I don't know, with LTO or with TS technology. We don't know, we're just protecting ourselves. But Black Pearl makes that easy because all we do is send an object to Black Pearl into an S3 bucket, and that's it. I don't have to worry about the rest of it. The Black Pearl knows what to do with every object that you put in this bucket. It knows that it has to write it to an LTO tape partition, and it has to also write it to a TS1150 tape partition. So it just does it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we work closely with the British Film Institute in the UK, and they've got a very similar infrastructure to us. It's virtually identical, and they've got exactly the same procedure. They've got 2 different tape technologies in there, 2 T950s, so it's a sensible approach.
Okay, great. And let's see if we can get one more question. We've got a little time in the break here. Let's see, we've got a couple coming in. Does the size of zipped DPX sequences cause any issues with S3 object storage if any changes are made?
Any changes are made? Well, I mean, when we scan a film, we create 150,000 DPX and 1 WAV file for the soundtrack. That all gets zipped up into one large zip file. These are tens of gigabytes in size, so they are big, but we are able to move them around the network. We have 10 gig Ethernet, and that we have a server room very close to where the film is actually scanned. So the data isn't traveling very far, and we can move it around reasonably quickly, all things considered. And once we get it onto the Black Pearl, then it's off and away doing its thing. So we don't change the zip files. Once they're scanned and checked, and as long as we're happy with the transfer of the data onto the Black Pearl, then the only other time we see them again is when we pull them out for people like Peter Jackson.
There you go. All right, and last question, is any of the data air-gapped? If so, how do you handle it? By air-gapped, and I think this is referring to the tape technology, in other words, not online or accessible, I would guess for protection, viruses, sort of thing?
Yes, well there's only, I mean, the data isn't air-gapped in that we don't take the tapes out of the library because we want users to be able to retrieve the data on demand. But like I said, we do have 2 separate libraries. We don't just rely on Black Pearl alone either. So we have the secondary copy using backup exec. Yes, it's not air-gapped in the traditional sense, but we have we have mitigations against that, I guess.
Gotcha. All right, we've got a couple more questions coming in, and what we'll do is we'll answer those offline and make sure that everyone does get their questions answered. I want to thank you, Ian. I want to thank you both for the presentation, the outstanding job, and sharing your insights with us today. All right, so next up, I think we've got about a minute or two break as we transition here. We are going to go to a conversation now from discussing how we collect information on battlefields and historically to looking to the sky. How do we collect information from satellites hovering around this globe that we live on?